It was the fall of 2008 and I was fresh out of college, brimming with optimism and ready to take on the world. I had landed what I thought was a promising entry-level job at a mid-sized publishing firm in the city. My official title? Administrative Coordinator. Not exactly glamorous, but it was a foot in the door, a start. I even bought a sensible blazer for the occasion. The office was located on the 12th floor of a charmingly outdated building. The elevator creaked like it was sighing under the weight of everyone's corporate dreams. The floors were carpeted in a speckled gray that screamed 1994, and the overhead fluorescent lights hummed constantly, like they were trying to lull us into submission. I reported to a woman named Melissa, the editorial director. Melissa was brilliant, sharp-tongued, and didn't waste time with small talk. She liked efficiency and had high expectations, but she was fair. I respected her almost immediately. Working under her was like being trained by a no-nonsense Jedi master. You learned fast or you got out of the way. But Melissa wasn't the problem. No, the problem was Suzanne Clipper. Suzanne was Melissa's assistant and technically, not even my direct supervisor. But she made it her mission to act like she was. She had been with the company for over a decade and it showed. Not in her skill set, unfortunately, which was frozen somewhere in the Windows 95 era, but in her territorial grip over anything that remotely resembled authority. Her cubicle was right outside Melissa's office, adorned with inspirational cat posters and a framed quote that read, "You don't have to be crazy to work here, but it helps." That should have been my first red flag. Suzanne had a very specific brand of superiority. She wasn't qualified, and deep down I think she knew it. But she overcompensated with a kind of passive-aggressive dictatorship that made everyone around her walk on eggshells. She wasn't evil exactly, just exhausting. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of onboarding and learning the company's internal systems, which looked like they were coded in a high school computer science class circa 2001. I was picking it up fast, which apparently was a problem, because the moment Suzanne noticed I was getting comfortable, she swooped in like a hawk who had just spotted a mouse in the copy room. "Hey," she cooed one morning, leaning against the side of my cubicle. "So, I need a quick favor. Just a teeny-tiny formatting thing for the director's quarterly report. You're so good with this stuff." I blinked. "Sure. What exactly do you need?" He handed me a flash drive. A flash drive. In 2008. "Just open it up and clean it up a bit. I'm not great with tables. You know how it is." That was the first of many quick favors that turned into hour-long projects. And every time I did one, she returned with another. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that she was just overwhelmed, or that maybe she didn't realize how time-consuming her requests were. But I was wrong. Suzanne wasn't overwhelmed. She was strategic. She knew exactly what she was doing, offloading her responsibilities onto the new girl while maintaining her cushy routine of long lunch breaks and midday gossip sessions with the other office veterans. It wasn't long before she started dropping little comments around the office. "I had to ask someone to fix it," she'd sigh loudly near the water cooler. "I guess some people just aren't team players." It wasn't subtle, and it worked. By the second month, I noticed my coworkers were a little colder toward me. Meetings got quieter when I walked in. Melissa remained supportive, but even she seemed a little more distant, distracted. Suzanne, for all her incompetence, was a master manipulator. Then came the jokes. Casual racism disguised as humor. "Harrow," she'd chirp whenever I walked by. "You people are just so good with technology. I guess it's in your genes, huh?" I'm Korean American. I grew up in the suburbs of California, not Seoul. I didn't even speak Korean fluently. But Suzanne saw my face and assigned me a stereotype. I smiled through it. At first. But it wore me down. I went to HR. I filled out a form. They scheduled a sensitivity refresher course for the entire office. Suzanne rolled her eyes through the whole thing and said afterward, "Geez, people are so sensitive these days. You can't even say hello without offending someone." I knew nothing would change. And so, 6 months in, I made a plan. I would find another job. I would leave on my own terms. But before I walked out of that office for good, I would make sure Suzanne remembered me. Not with drama. Not with confrontation. But with poetic, subtle, glorious revenge. I just had to wait for the perfect moment. And that moment came during my final week. By the second week at the firm, I had already learned to recognize the pattern. The subtle sounds of Suzanne's kitten heels tapping across the floor. The curt, clipped tone of her voice echoing through the corridor before she even reached my desk. The forced smile that never quite touched her eyes. She had a rhythm, like a metronome ticking just a little too fast. And if you didn't keep up, you'd get crushed by it. "Amelia," she called, her voice wrapped in artificial sweetness. "We're all attending the director's luncheon today. Be a dear and set up the projector in Conference B, would you?" I glanced at my to-do list. I have a deadline to finish Ms. Harper's investor slides before noon. "Oh, those can wait," Suzanne interjected, waving a dismissive hand. "This is for the director. Priorities, sweetheart." Sweetheart. I bit the inside of my cheek to stop from snapping. Suzanne loved using pet names, especially ones that felt intentionally condescending. She also loved giving me the kinds of tasks meant for tech support or administrative staff. Things that weren't my responsibility. But if I pushed back, she'd raise an eyebrow and log it mentally like a schoolteacher taking notes on a delinquent. And it never stopped at just delegation. When I finally got to my investor presentation, she hovered behind me, offering input no one asked for. "That font is a bit aggressive, don't you think? And do we really need the bullet points? They're so pedestrian." Funny, coming from someone who once asked me how to open the internet. But it wasn't just about petty corrections or surprise assignments. Suzanne had a way of gathering people around her like a throne court. Passive followers who absorbed her tone as gospel. I'd catch coworkers side-eyeing me in the break room after one of Suzanne's whispered critiques. "Amelia's young," she'd say with a sigh. "Still learning how things are done properly." Still learning. Funny. My metrics were among the highest in the department. But Suzanne wasn't content with undermining me professionally. She started slipping in jabs that tiptoed into darker territory. "You know, when I first saw your last name, I assumed you were a mail-order bride or something." She laughed, the room going quiet around her. I stared at her, stunned. "Excuse me." "Oh, don't be so sensitive, honey," she purred. "It's just a joke." Except it wasn't. And that became her signature move. Make an offensive comment, then play innocent when I called it out. She'd smile sweetly, tilt her head and say, "You really need to learn to take a joke." The truth was, Suzanne didn't care about jokes. He cared about power. And she had it, lots of it. She'd been with the company for years, a relic from a bygone era of nepotism and unspoken hierarchies. Her closeness to the director gave her an aura of invincibility. People tiptoed around her tantrums. Executives indulged her paranoia. Even HR seemed to tread lightly. So when she began casually mentioning that I struggled with authority, I knew exactly what she was doing. She was setting the stage. It wasn't enough to make me uncomfortable. She wanted me out. And if I wasn't going to leave on my own, she'd create the perfect narrative. One where I was the volatile one, the difficult employee, the overconfident millennial who needed to be put in her place. I wasn't going to let that happen. But I had to be smart. Because Suzanne didn't just play dirty, she played well. By the time my third month rolled around, I had become a master of invisibility. Not in the literal sense, of course. I still attended meetings, turned in polished deliverables, kept to deadlines. But emotionally, socially, I'd learned how to disappear in plain sight. That's what it takes to survive someone like Suzanne. She watched everyone like a hawk with a spreadsheet. She kept mental tallies of your tardiness, even if it was 2 minutes. Whether you smiled during group meetings and how many times you asked a question she deemed obvious. She treated the office like her kingdom and herself as its crown jewel. And anyone who posed a threat to her reign, she crushed them with suffocating micromanagement. Me. I was apparently a walking threat, even if I didn't know why. She'd corner me in the hallway, clipboard in hand like a parody of middle management. "Amelia, the coffee order for Thursday's breakfast seminar was missing soy milk," she'd hiss. "You don't want to get a reputation for being forgetful, do you?" I wasn't on the coffee order. But you could have double-checked. That's what a team player would have done. God, she was exhausting. But I knew better than to fight her head-on. So I smiled. I nodded. I became the picture-perfect junior associate. Polite, hardworking, dependable, unthreatening. And I documented everything. Every time she tried to assign me a task outside my scope, I confirmed via email. Per our conversation earlier, just to clarify, do you need me to pause Project Echo to assist with the seminar notes? Every time she tried to gaslight me in front of others, I kept a calm demeanor and made a note in a private Google Doc I'd titled, "See, the Suzanne Chronicles." The racism? I logged it. The condescension? Both. The fake performance warnings she whispered to my supervisor? Oh, definitely logged. Because I knew the only way to win against someone who manipulated the system was to know the system better than they did. My direct manager, Ms. Harper, liked me. She wasn't blind to Suzanne's behavior, but she had the spine of a decorative plant. You just have to understand her background, she once told me. She's from a different era. She means well. But intentions meant nothing when you're being slowly buried by sabotage. Goodwill didn't erase sleepless nights and panic attacks in the bathroom. And background didn't excuse microaggressions disguised as corporate banter. So I started planning. Not revenge. Yet. Just self-preservation. I updated my resume. Started networking quietly. I joined Women in Tech Slack communities. I even reached out to a college mentor and asked her to look over my portfolio. The idea was to have a soft landing when I left. But the universe had other plans. Because 2 weeks before I planned to put in my notice, Suzanne cornered me in the hallway with a smile that made my skin crawl. "Hey Amelia, since it's your last week, would you mind helping me clean up my computer? There's just so many files everywhere and I could really use your help." I blinked. "By last week? Oh, I thought you knew." My heart sank. Knew what? She leaned in and dropped her voice to a whisper. "Harper's decided to let you go. Said the cultural fit just isn't there. It'll be official Friday." I stood there frozen, her words buzzing like static in my ears. She walked off humming. I went straight to Harper's office. To her credit, she looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I was going to talk to you today," she said, wringing her hands. "This was a collective decision. Some feedback came in that you've been difficult, that you're not great with authority. There's also some concern about your attitude. I'm sorry, Amelia." No performance warnings. No documentation. Just a vague cloud of feedback, created and curated by Suzanne. I nodded, thanked her, and walked out. Then I sat in the parking lot, stared at my dashboard, and let it all hit me. I was being fired because someone didn't like my presence. Because I was too competent, too confident, too unwilling to smile and say yes every time a grown woman barked orders at me like she was running a boot camp instead of an office. And that's when something in me snapped. Suzanne wanted to treat this job like high school. She had no idea who she just tried to bully. Because I was done being invisible. When I got home that evening, I sat on the couch in complete silence. No music. No TV. Just the glow of my laptop screen and the relentless throb in my temples. I stared at the email draft I had opened hours earlier, my resignation letter. It had sat unfinished for days, waiting for me to find the courage. But now it was irrelevant. Suzanne had beat me to it. She'd managed to twist a corporate knife behind my back, smiling sweetly the whole time. And the worst part wasn't the job loss. It was how powerless I felt. It wasn't the first time a woman like Suzanne had tried to silence a woman like me, but I was determined it would be the last. So I took a deep breath, deleted the resignation draft, and opened a new document. This one had a different title. Suzanne's Rules for Surviving the Workplace. It was satire. Or maybe it was a diary entry. Either way, it was dripping with bitterness. Rule number 1. Make sure you're useful but never too useful. Suzanne doesn't like competition. Rule number 2. Smile when she says, "Hero." Laugh when she makes tech jokes. Pretend it doesn't sting. Rule number 3. Don't correct her when she says "you're" instead of "your." He's fragile. Rule number 4. Let her steal your credit. Don't speak up. Don't rock the boat. Rule number 5. When she gaslights you, remember, this is just corporate culture. The rules went on. 57 of them to be exact. Each one was a punch I'd taken, a moment I'd swallowed, a humiliation I'd buried. Writing it all down didn't heal me, but it gave me something far more powerful than closure. It gave me a plan. The next morning, I arrived at the office 20 minutes early. It was my last official day, might as well make it count. Suzanne wasn't in yet. Perfect. I made myself a cup of the cheap office coffee, then slipped into her office like a shadow. I knew her password. Of course I did. She had once loudly typed it in during a presentation. Susie 123. Her desktop was chaos. Files everywhere. Dozens of Word docs titled things like Final Latest and Doing Elite. She had once told me she didn't trust IT, so she kept all her important files on her desktop. Perfect. I began with the autocorrect. I opened Word, then Outlook, then Teams. One by one, I modified the autocorrect library on each. Regards became Raggards. Suzanne Clipper became Susie Clippet. Dear became Dearest Pumpkin. Follow up became Stalk Like a Hawk. He became At Your Laziest Convenience. I replaced dozens of common corporate terms with slightly off, hilarious alternatives. Subtle enough that she'd look unprofessional, but not so blatant she'd notice right away. Then I set up a few email templates to autocorrect full sentences. Every time she typed "Please see attached," Outlook would replace it with, "I hope this document doesn't explode your tiny brain." Every time she typed "Let me know," it became, "Don't make me repeat myself like I do every day with Amelia." Then came the piece de resistance. I found her desktop folder labeled Performance Reviews. Inside, old evaluations including mine, and Suzanne's own. She had saved a Word doc titled Review. I opened it and added a line at the bottom. Suzanne continues to show initiative, although her communication style remains challenging. I made sure to keep the font and formatting identical. Subtle, quiet, enough to raise questions at her next review without being obvious sabotage. Before I logged off, I left one final surprise. I created a desktop shortcut labeled fastercomputer.exe. When clicked, it opened a Word doc that said, "Dragging windows won't make your system faster. But nice try, Suzanne." I left the office with a smile that stretched ear to ear. That night, I got a text from a former coworker. "Did you mess with her computer? She's losing it. Keeps shouting, 'Why does this keep saying Raggards?'" I didn't respond. But I slept like a baby. By the time Suzanne's chaos started to ripple across the office, I was long gone. But my legacy? Well, it had only just begun. The day after I left, I got a call. Not from HR, not from Suzanne, but from Melissa, one of the only real friends I'd made in that building. She was gasping from laughter so hard I could barely understand her at first. I walked past Suzanne's office and I swear, "Amelia," she said, it looked like she was trying to exorcise her computer. Apparently, Suzanne had typed out an entire client email, only for Outlook to change. "Looking forward to hearing from you in 2. Can't wait to see how you screw this up." She'd hit send before noticing. Melissa said Suzanne stormed out of her office like someone had cursed her, waving her mouse in the air like a wand, accusing IT of planting malware to ruin her professional image. Her exact words, apparently. IT played dumb. They always did when it came to Suzanne. They offered to run a scan and suggested she try restarting her machine. But I knew the truth. She'd be living in autocorrect hell for weeks before she figured it out. Melissa said she'd watched Suzanne draft the same email 3 times, her face twitching every time "Dear" turned into "Dearest Pumpkin," or Suzanne Clipper became Susie Clippit. What made it even better? Suzanne didn't type fast. Every backspace was a production. She'd hit the delete key like it owed her money. I imagined her squinting at her screen, lips pursed, muttering to herself as another email betrayed her at the last second. She had no clue how to fix it, and she refused to ask IT because that would mean admitting defeat. For once, she was powerless. And it was delicious. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because while Suzanne was fumbling with emails, I had a plan for something even more permanent. I remembered that companies still did monthly all-staff meetings via Zoom. Boring, bloated meetings with fake enthusiasm and "go team" chants that no one believed in. Suzanne always hosted the slideshow, and she had a habit of reusing the same PowerPoint deck every month, simply updating the title and a few bullet points. Guess who had access to the shared drive before I left? Yours truly. Guess who downloaded a copy of that PowerPoint deck? Also yours truly. And guess who had Adobe Premiere and a petty streak the size of Texas? You guessed it. The presentation was already dull. So dull, in fact, that no one ever really paid attention to the individual slides. It was the perfect canvas. I replaced one of the slides in the middle of the deck. It looked exactly like the others at a glance. White background, blue bullet points. But the content? Let's just say it wasn't standard office fare. It read, "Internal comms update. Stop sending reply all to lunch orders. No, Suzanne, your password isn't secure if it's your own name. HR still reviewing if hero counts as a microaggression. Spoiler, it does. Yes, clicking harder doesn't fix your mouse. Dragging windows doesn't make them faster. We made that up." I sent it to Melissa with a little note. If this somehow finds its way into next month's meeting, I wouldn't be mad. She responded 5 minutes later with a screenshot. Done. Apparently, the next all-staff Zoom went exactly as I'd hoped. Suzanne was reading from the slides in her usual robotic voice, pausing to explain each bullet until she reached my slide. Melissa said there was a full 3 seconds of silence. Then Suzanne cleared her throat and tried to move on. Too late. People were already laughing. One brave soul even asked, "Wait, was that HR thing real?" Suzanne's face turned the color of raw shrimp. She mumbled something about a technical glitch and ended the meeting early. By the next day, the slide had been deleted from the drive. Melissa swore Suzanne tried to blame IT again, but they shut her down fast. Apparently, someone had proof she'd uploaded the presentation herself. No one else had touched the file. She started printing every email she wrote. Every single one. Someone found a stack of emails in the copy room, all ending with regards. But it wasn't about emails. It wasn't about typos. And it definitely wasn't about me trying to ruin her career. It was about consequences. For every time she made me feel small. For every racist joke she thought was harmless. For every time she smiled while twisting the truth, knowing her last name would always shield her from fallout. She thought she owned the place. Now she couldn't even trust her own keyboard. Weeks passed. And while I was adjusting to my new job, peaceful, functional, non-toxic, word of Suzanne's unraveling kept trickling in through office grapevines. It started with little things. She began carrying around a yellow legal pad, refusing to type notes on her laptop anymore, blaming keyboard unreliability. One of my old teammates joked that she looked like a conspiracy theorist building a case against the spacebar. Her handwriting, but apparently she trusted ink more than the cursed ghost inside her email. Melissa sent me photos once. A post-it note Suzanne had taped over her monitor said, "No autocorrect. No shortcuts. No trust." She was spiraling, and yet she still refused to ask for help. That was the beauty of it. Her ego wouldn't let her admit she didn't understand what was happening. And the longer it lasted, the more paranoid she became. According to Melissa, the cherry on top came during an all-hands meeting, one where senior leadership was supposed to announce a partnership deal worth millions. Suzanne was running the presentation again. Big mistake. You see, I'd learned from the first time. I hadn't just messed with one slide. I'd buried a second-time bomb deeper inside the deck. Slide number 23. It wasn't a joke this time. It looked real, professional, sleek. Blue title bar, black serif font. Red. Employee Relations Update. As part of our ongoing diversity initiative, all internal communications will be reviewed for cultural sensitivity. Mandatory DI training will be required for all staff. Leadership expects immediate improvement from Suzanne Clipper regarding her use of racially insensitive greetings. No further hero incidents will be tolerated. Melissa said the silence was deafening. The VP, a no-nonsense woman named Carla, turned her camera off. You know someone's pissed when they go dark on Zoom. Suzanne just froze. She didn't speak, didn't click, didn't breathe. The next slide never came. The meeting ended abruptly. By Friday, she was placed on temporary leave pending review. By the next Tuesday, gone. No goodbye email. No exit memo. Just vanished. Apparently, she blamed the IT department, HR, and that Asian girl, that'd be me, for conspiring against her. Said she was being erased by woke culture. But no one was listening anymore. The executive team had found enough complaints buried in HR reports from the last 5 years that they didn't even need my petty sabotage to justify it. That PowerPoint just gave them a reason to finally look. Me. I didn't need revenge to be dramatic. It didn't need flames or lawyers or a big confrontation in the office parking lot. Sometimes the smallest virus kills the strongest host. All I did was plant a seed. She watered it with her own ignorance. And in the end, she reaped exactly what she sowed. After Suzanne's departure, the office shifted in the strangest way. It was like someone had cracked a window after years of stagnant air. People started laughing more. Meetings were shorter, lighter. Even the tone of emails changed. Less passive-aggressive, more collaborative. Melissa joked that the whole floor felt like it had gotten a divorce from a toxic parent. And though I wasn't physically there anymore, I felt the ripple of it. Old coworkers started reconnecting. Several messaged me directly, cautiously at first, then more openly. They weren't sure I even wanted to talk about Suzanne, but once I gave them the green light, the stories poured out. Apparently, after I left, she doubled down. More microaggressions. More paranoia. She installed a whiteboard in her office and began keeping daily tallies of miscommunications. A passive-aggressive hit list she'd reference in team huddles. And then there was the weirdest one. She began carrying her personal keyboard in a tote bag, refusing to use corrupted ones at shared workstations. Melissa swore it looked like a weapon case. She treated Word like it was possessed, she said. But even with all that, the final straw was something I hadn't expected. HR had quietly opened an internal audit after the PowerPoint incident. And while my subtle sabotage might have ignited suspicion, it wasn't what sealed her fate. It was her search history. Turns out she'd been Googling some very questionable stuff on the company Wi-Fi, including hilariously things like how to remove autocorrect sabotage, signs you're being targeted at work, legal action for tech bullying, why won't my computer obey me? Mixed in with those were much worse, things she thought no one would ever find, racist memes, jokes forwarded to her personal email and then accidentally opened on a company machine. HR hadn't needed much more. The leadership team saw the writing on the wall, and so did she. She didn't even fight it. Just disappeared. Melissa said the office held a silent celebration. Not an official party, just the kind of knowing energy that floats in the air when something heavy has lifted. People brought donuts. Someone brought in a Bluetooth speaker and played Lizzo quietly in the break room. Even Carla, the VP, made a dry joke during a staff call. Let's all agree not to use Comic Sans or make racial assumptions in email. Sound fair? Got a laugh. And that was it. A chapter closed. Me. I moved on, but I didn't forget. Every now and then I'd type her name, Susie Clippitt, into a Word doc just to make myself smile. I never told anyone at my new job what I did. I didn't need to. That version of me, the one who suffered silently under Suzanne's slow paper-cut tyranny, had shed her skin. The new me? Smarter, sharper, no longer willing to endure quiet cruelty. And while revenge didn't change what I went through, it did something better. It reminded me that even in a system designed to favor the worst people, a single keystroke placed in just the right place can unravel an entire facade. 2 years had passed since Suzanne's dramatic departure, but her legend, or rather her downfall, continued to echo through the halls of that office. I hadn't expected to ever walk those halls again, but fate, as it tends to, had a different plan. It started with an email from HR. Not the same HR I remembered. This one came from a newer director named Carla, who'd taken over after Suzanne's chaos apparently prompted a structural reshuffle. "Hey, I know this is unexpected, but we're looking to rehire for your old position. And your name came up multiple times. Would you be open to a quick coffee chat?" I nearly laughed out loud. At first, I was going to decline. I'd moved on. I was in a much healthier role at a startup with no Suzanne in sight. But curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to meet Carla downtown for coffee. She was younger than I expected, probably mid-30s, sharp in both words and wardrobe. The first thing she said when I walked in, "You're the one who rewired Suzanne's whole life, aren't you?" I blinked. "Excuse me." She smiled. "The autocorrect sabotage? Oh yeah. That became office folklore. People still joke about pulling a Susie clip pit when someone gets passive-aggressive in emails." I almost choked on my lot. Apparently, the IT department had known all along. They just let it happen. "She made their lives miserable," Carla said. "They figured if someone had the gall and technical skill to do what you did, you deserved an award, not a write-up." My jaw dropped. Turns out Suzanne's departure had been part of a much bigger HR sweep. After she left, they dug deeper and uncovered all kinds of internal complaints she'd buried or ignored. Several junior staff had filed anonymous reports, not just about her behavior but about the toxic culture she helped create. The company wasn't proud of it, but they were trying to make it right. And that coffee chat, it wasn't just about rehiring me. It was about hiring me back with authority. "Would you consider returning as a project lead?" Carla asked. "You'd be training new hires and helping restructure team workflows. You'd report directly to me, not as Suzanne type ever again." It felt like the universe had circled back and handed me the reins. But I needed a moment. That night, I walked through my old emails, rereading the messages Suzanne had once bled red ink all over. I remembered how small she tried to make me feel, and how quietly I'd gotten my power back one keystroke at a time. I opened a blank Word doc and typed, "Dearest Suzanne, you taught me everything I never want to be. Regards, me." Then I hit save. Not to gloat, just to remind myself that even petty victories can carve space for bigger ones. I took the job. My first week back, I met the new team, a mix of fresh faces and old colleagues who'd once whispered their frustrations to me in elevators or over sad sandwiches in the break room. No. They were excited, energized. There was actual collaboration, people lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down. Melissa stopped by my new desk on day 2. "I knew you'd be back," she said, grinning. "I heard you're the reason IT keeps a backup of autocorrect logs now." I laughed. Let's just say I gave them a reason to improve documentation. She leaned in. "Did you ever regret it?" I shook my head. Not for a second. The best revenge? It wasn't the glitchy chaos or the subtle sabotage. It was walking back into that office, head held high, not to fix what was broken but to rebuild it into something better. Suzanne may have tried to rewrite my story, but in the end it was my hands on the keyboard. And I chose every word.